Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome back to my video, and today we are going to discuss a new topic, and the title is Finishing Horizons Problem in the Comparison of China and the West. And this is the part 2 of theoretical direction, so part 7. Let's start with the first one, is the modernity problem. Comparing East and West is inextricably linked to the problem of modernity. Its origin in Europe and spread to the rest of the world via trade, exchange, and violence, including East Asia. The appropriate or original disciplines of literary comparative poetry, theater, fiction, and philosophy establish the relationship within this larger ideological system, where literary and aesthetic meaning constantly play a role in the act of comparison. Because of its universalism, modernity, which defines itself in part as a mode that involves the contrast between the present and the past, the modernity and the non-modern relies heavily on internal comparison. Next one is metaphor problem. In modern literary criticism, metaphor is regarded as a quasi-universal feature of poetic language, and according to Heidegger, a fundamental component of so-called metaphysics, since Aristotle, the concept of metaphor has been an important part of the European aesthetic tradition. Despite the fact that Heidegger does not specifically address China, his assertion is a potential first step in the ongoing discussion about China aesthetic characteristic. One of the key strands of which is the question of whether or not metaphor is used in China poetry. The issue is that Pauline Yu from China, Owen, and others have conflated legitimate criticism of how categories have been researched and understood with criticism of categories as elements of heuristic thinking. While it is true that the categories through which aestheticians and critics are trained in European and American universities do not account for various types of difference or texts produced outside the West, the solution to this problem is not to abandon categories but to improve them. The next one is authenticity problem. The East-West comparison of work created after the 17th century takes a more recognizable approach and employs the majority of the technique and potential drawbacks of the impact study paradigm. The publication of Edward Said's Orientalism in 1978 can be seen as a West watershed moment in this case. Orientalism significantly recontextualized the history of cross-cultural representation, and which influenced by arguing that both of these are part of the history of imperialism, which connect the entire representative and scientific apparatus of Europe and the US with an important role in ethical justice. The West dominated the rest of the world in the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, even as the discipline of post-colonial study evolved in this region. Comparative research in East Asia largely remained outside. This field was fueled in part by the fervor of the battle between the new post-colonialists and the older generation of Orientalists, for whom it had done so much breadth of the inventiveness. This is due to the widespread belief held by European and American authorities, who do not want their fields associated with imperialism, that China and Japan were never colonized. And that's it, our discussion for today. Thank you for watching, and see you again in another video.